Want to welcome you all into the Play Sheet Sports podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Jackson, the publisher and editor at PlaySheetSports.com, joined by special guest Rusty Udy, co-worker for the last 7 years. Obviously, we have found ourselves in different situations over the last 2 weeks. Our previous employer decided to cut the sports department, so trying to start something new, and we had a podcast over there. So we're gonna try to make things kind of go over here. I'm gonna bring Rusty on from time to time pretty often, along with other guests here. But this is going to be one of our mediums to kind of fill the void that's been left and hopefully bring everyone the same great coverage, just in different capacities. But enough about me, Rusty. How you been doing the last couple weeks?
I've been doing all right. It's a little bit of a change, and still going to, even before I started working as a sports writer, I always went to sporting events anyway. So been going to still going to several of those and, covering some stuff. So yeah, a little bit of a difference, not what we've been used to, but, I learned a long time ago. I mean, I'm 61 years old now. There's a lot of curveballs that come at you. You just got to, sometimes you swing and miss, and you just got to get back in the box and swing again.
Absolutely. We were just talking about it before we started recording the show, but we got a lot to talk about. Right after the news broke that they're cutting the sports department, I had a trip planned anyways and paid for it to go to the Super Bowl. And, so I went ahead and did that. And, over the last week, I was kind of building the site. So I was kind of off the grid a little bit, but was able to kind of keep a bit of a beat on things and stay in the loop a little bit. And I kind of want to start off with, I think, is the most intriguing storyline throughout this season. And we've talked about it before on previous shows, but Class AA Region 3, I have absolutely no idea what to think about this. And you've actually had some opportunities to cover a couple of these games. I think final seeding, James Monroe and Wyoming East are supposed to play. I can't remember if it's Thursday or Friday.
Thursday,
It is
tomorrow.
Thursday.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
Thursday.
we're recording this on Wednesday, so
Thursday.
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 That's weather permitting, of course. And Monroe County is very cautious in their approach when it comes to the weather in these games like that. So
Right.
with more snow coming, I'd be surprised if they play it. And I don't know with the calendar the way it is if there's going to be time to make that game up. But the teams that are in this region, West Side, James Monroe, Wyoming East, Bluefield, Midland Trail, Liberties, I think Summers County and Mingo Central rounded out.
Right.
But there's been a lot going on here. James Monroe, I think, has the best record in the region right now. Uh, what I thought maybe West Side. I started to count them out a little bit early, and then they had a stretch there where they beat Logan and they beat Wyoming East. So we had an opportunity to, like maybe West Side's crawling back in it. Then they go to Lynn Side and they lose there, and they even the series James Monroe does there. And that's
Right.
actually James Monroe's only loss in the region. So there's a lot there, and Wyoming East probably still has a shot at claiming that number one seed. It's tough. It's probably an outside shot, but it probably starts with going ahead. You have to win tomorrow if they end up playing this game, well, Thursday or whenever you're listening to this. But yeah, this is a wacky region, and Bluefield. I want to hit on them real quick. I covered their game last night against James Monroe, and it was a 7 point game. It was a 4 point game with a minute to go. They're just heavily battered. They only have two kids right now that are playing that were originally in the rotation to start with. Amari Helms started and he was hurt for a good portion of the season. He was back. Ricky Dunford's still playing. Jay Smith is still playing, but Grayson Paris, he's hurt. I think Coach Webster said he tore a meniscus.
Right.
Uh, I'm trying to think. Jack Hurt wasn't with the team last night either.
Yeah.
So they're in a bit
Definitely.
of a pickle wise, but they're still competitive. So
Yeah.
you've had a chance to see all these teams. What do you make of this?
Well, it's a head scratcher. I mean, it really is. I mean, I think the 4-5 team, the 4-5 teams are pretty much set. I think it's going to be, Middle and Trail at 4, Liberty at 5, 6, 7, 8. I don't know. It's another toss up. You got Bluefield, Summers County, and Mingo Central. Which Bluefield really played all these teams tough early. Then they lose all these kids, and they have about a 3 game stretch where they really look bad. And you think, okay, well, they're not very good. And then last night they go to Lynnside and probably play James Monroe better than anybody's played them all year. So I don't know that. All I know is whoever gets Bluefield in the first round is not going to be happy because that's a dangerous team. I mean, they're really athletic, and even though they've struggled, they're still pretty good. But as far as the top three goes, I don't know. I mean, if Wyoming East beats James Monroe tomorrow night, or if they get that game in by the weekend, I don't know how you distinguish them. They've all won on their home floors. When you start looking at schedules, they're fairly similar in the wins within the region. I don't know how you slice it. And, that's going to be an interesting call because they are going to do it via conference call. It is head to head. You have to pretty much say, these are my votes and, kind of explain yourself. But I really don't know how you divide them. And, I've got some thoughts on who I think, how it should play out. But, way I think, two other people's going to think totally different on, the top three. So I don't know. I don't know how you do it.
Uh, so I'm gonna put you on the spot, and so it's not that they're gonna fire. I'll preface it with who I would go with my top four. Um, so I would go right now going into it James and Rowe, and I don't necessarily think that they're the most talented team in this entire thing. I think that the two Wyoming County schools are probably more talented overall, but they play so well together, and they've won these games. They're hard to beat at home, and that's not the referee sort of. When you say somebody's hard to beat at home, typically people think officiating comes into play there. They're
It's
just hard.
atmosphere.
It's a
It's
hard place
atmosphere.
to play. Boys, girls, it doesn't matter who the officials are. It's really tough. But I think that the fact that they've only lost one in-region game. And I know you probably look at the rest of their schedule and you don't think that it's as difficult. And I agree. They've not played a Logan or a Chapmanville or Shady Spring. I know those things aren't on their schedule, but I still look at them and I've got to give them the nod. If you're going based on region, they've beaten all these teams all but once. Uh, I've got to give it to them. Uh, Two is tricky. Two is extremely tricky when you get to the two Wyoming County schools. That that's where it gets tough because when you're dividing it, I look at the records there, and the schedule. I would say West Side strength of schedule is probably a little bit more difficult. They've both played Logan. They've both beaten Logan. Uh,
Right.
West Side's played Chapmanville, but that was obviously I think it was the first game of the season or second game of the season. It was back in December, and they lost that game. So yeah, I'm gonna pull up West Side's schedule right now, just to kind of take a look. See who all they've played, just to kind of compare. But right now, I have James and Rowe at one. Uh, yeah, Wyoming East, Bingo Central. So I look at their schedule. They split with Logan, so they've lost to Logan once, but their win against Logan came recently. Uh, they played Greater Beckley. See, that's when you really kind of get into it. I think that what it will come down to is what have you done for me lately? Um, Wyoming East has a win against Charleston Catholic just because of the recency factor, and because I think that's more indicative of who the team is now. I think I'd probably lean West Side, maybe. And that's under that because I think that their regional records are probably the same or so. I might lean West Side and then Wyoming East, but either of those top three seeds, you could probably convince me either way. But I think right now James Monroe has earned the one seed. Bluefield's going to be a tricky one because their schedule isn't normal compared to the other teams. They always play Beckley twice, and they play up a lot. Uh, they've only won two games, but I do
They
think,
are 4A. They are
yeah,
4A wins. That's the
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
They have the bottom three. They have the best wins. Although
They've
it's
only got two of them, yeah.
yeah,
And I was talking to a coach in the region over the last week, kind of about this, and they were like, that's the issue I'm running into is where to rank Bluefield because they don't have the wins, but talent-wise, you would probably think that they might be a little bit better than Trail or Liberty or Summers County. But yeah, I mean, you never know once you get on that court and in the postseason time. you could
Yeah.
feasibly see Bluefield going in and winning a regional round. Like, let's say they end up as a 4 seed or 5 seed and they win that game, then you go to Linside. And if it's another, 4 point game in the final minute, you've got a chance to win that game, which is all you're asking for with the spot in the state tournament on the line. I've seen that story before with them. I think 4 years ago, actually, they went to Wyoming Easton sectional
Right.
and then one in the regional. So, yeah, if I were to rank them right now, I would probably go just based on recency, James and Rowe, West Side, Wyoming East, and Bluefield. But I think if Wyoming East beats James and Rowe, then I don't think they should be any lower than the 2 seed.
See, that's what it all depends on this next game, as to where, I mean, James Monroe wins this next game. There's no argument whatsoever. It's easily James. Well, I don't say easily. It is James Monroe by the fact that of the top three, they've only lost once, as opposed to where the other two have lost twice. Um, I think that I don't. I really don't know how to rank them. I mean, I really don't, because I think Wyoming East is in the best situation because they have a true point guard and kind of true guards, and
Yes.
I think that's where West Side and James Monroe maybe struggle just a little bit. Now they have other strong points, other athletic kids, but even the other night against West Side, James Monroe was a little susceptible to the pressure. And to their credit, when they got the chance to hit those big shots, they hit big shots. And there was about four big threes that they hit there when West Side was right on the kind of the verge of maybe getting right up against them a little bit. And so, you know, again, what we talk about home court advantage, knocking down threes at your own place as opposed to knocking down threes at another place is two different situations, especially in high school basketball, especially in the postseason. So, that's the thing is like, who's going to be able to come together at crunch time. And that's the one thing I would kind of hedge a little bit on Wyoming East is although I really like those freshman guards, they are freshman guards.
Mhm.
And, they've been through some battles, they've been through some wars, and I feel like they will handle the situation really well. It's just hard to say, how well, you know. And, so I would probably lean towards them as far as who I think's the better team in a postseason atmosphere. But I don't know necessarily that you could say they've earned that number one spot. And that's the problem is, you know, if you look at Wyoming East and West Side, well, they both beat Logan, but they both, I can't remember if Wyoming East has played at Logan yet, but you got to figure at Logan, he's probably going to go against them, So they've got really similar resumes, and so does James Monroe in the fact of outside of I think the first part of the season, they've ran off a ton of wins in a row. So
Yeah, Wyoming East plays at Logan on March 1st. So yeah, their final 4 games, James Monroe, Bluefield, Liberty, Midland Trail. But I would imagine that the Liberty and Trail games probably won't really factor into this as much. Everyone's looking at
Well,
the
that's the thing is like we're supposed to get the girls sectional or regional, sorry, the girls regional seedings tomorrow, and that's because it's actually been extended a day. Now I
yeah.
don't know if they'll extend the boys, and so if the boys aren't extended, they would actually be due by next Tuesday. So if this game doesn't get played Thursday night and they can't play it over the weekend, and I'm not pointing any fingers and I'm not insinuating anything, but just how anxious is James Monroe to play this game? Because, they're in the driver's seat right now. Now, I'm not saying they're going to try to dodge them by any means, but, it's not like you're going to put yourself in a bad situation either, to get this game on the books. So I don't know. My solution is bring it all to Armory and let's play it out there and not worry about it. That's my solution.
We've grown to have that appreciation for those regionals or sectionals that are located in one place instead of all over, especially
Yeah.
as for coverage purposes, where it's like, okay, we can knock it
Right.
all out. I don't have
Right.
to worry about, oh well, these two teams are playing on the same night at 2 different venues. So yeah,
Yep. But
Yeah.
it has, the one thing about this setup, it has changed the whole complexion of the regular season,
Hmm.
because we've talked to numerous coaches, and the philosophy basically is we got 22 exhibition games. We're just trying to get ready for the postseason. Well, now the postseason is a little different, and whoever's the top two seeds in this region, it's huge to be able to play at home. Especially in round two,
And
to be able
really,
to play at
it
home.
almost doesn't matter about you don't want to be in that 2-3 slot. You don't want
Exactly.
to be either of those teams in
That's
that 2-3
exactly right, and
slot.
that's no disrespect to Liberty and Mill and Trail, who can come up and sneak up and get you. But if you had to pick, yeah, you don't want to be in the 2-3 slot, because you're going to go to one of those three places and have to try to win a basketball game, and that's not going to be easy.
Yeah, it's and the way these teams are constructed is really interesting to me. And I say that it's not like professional leagues where you get to pick your players, but they're
Right.
extreme. Like if I were to pick probably the top three or four most talented players in the region, I don't think they're probably coming from James Monroe, but James Monroe is just like they have 8 players that can legitimately like any
They're
event
gritty.
go for
Yeah,
double
they're
digits
gritty. They
and
hit
kill
big
you every
shots,
night.
and it seems like they take turns. I mean, it's not like the same guy. I mean, the games I've seen James Monroe before the other night against Westside, Leighton Dowdy had kind of struggled a little bit. He wasn't quite himself, and I still think that goes back to maybe the injury in football, but I don't know that for a fact. But I just know he wasn't himself.
And he
Well,
was
the
sick
other
last
night
week too.
against Westside, he looked like the old Leighton Dowdy, and he was knocking shots down. So, they seem to have that guy step up that needs to get it done, and that's a special thing that you can't really teach or coach. If you got guys that just have that mentality of, okay, I'm gonna knock this shot down, that goes a long way in the postseason.
Yeah, it's like because it's one night it could be Bryce Gardner and Caden
Yeah.
Hines, or it could be Ryan Mans, or it could be Jaden Miller, or it could be Lane Taylor, it could be
Yep.
Brady Baker. They legitimately that Leighton Dowdy, they legitimately have all these kids that do things well. Will Bogus does a lot of things well,
Yep.
and it's like, oh, you look down, this kid had 15 points, or he had 10 rebounds, or they did some blocks, and they do a lot of things well. And they do a lot of the dirty things that make the difference, the offensive rebounds
Right.
and things like that. And if you're down with 2.5 minutes to go, they run the most efficient and effective burn clock offense. Like you see it,
Right.
like if
Right.
it's under 3 minutes and they have that lead, you
Yep.
will see the ball stop. And
That's exactly right.
every game that I've watched them, they do it. They do it well, and
Yep.
they've closed games out with it. But then you look at West Side, where I think Austin, where Bishop and Blankenship
Yep.
and Vance and all those kids, they can also do the same things. They're very efficient scorers, but it's man, it's so different. And Wyoming gets the same thing. Muscari can dish the ball. Fox
Mhm.
can have big nights, and
Yep.
Braxton Morgan can have big nights, and Brock Johnson. They have good shooters there. So it's man, it's just it's really interesting. It's a shame because I genuinely think that and that's not even considering Bluefield. Jay Smith, you can make an argument that he might be the best overall player in the region.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah, and he's on that team. He's probably a lot of the reason why everyone in the region still worries about Bluefield at this
Right.
point.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's it's
Well,
a
and the styles change in the
yeah.
postseason. I mean, when I watched Midland Trail and Liberty last night, it was a complete opposite from the first time that they played. And Curtis admitted that, he was a little hard headed in the first game, wanted to play man to man the whole time. And last night they went zone on Liberty and just basically shut them down. So, there's a lot more, there's different decisions made in the postseason about how games are played. It's not the same as and we see that in the NBA. I mean, when it gets into the postseason, it's just a different style, the way these kids play and the way the coaches coach. So, that'll be a key too, and as to how they want to kind of structure these. And I think we're going to get a lot of games in the 40s, because of this.
Yeah, and it's same for officiating too. Usually they're more apt to swallow the whistle.
Right.
At
Right.
least it
And if
depends.
that's the case, I think that favors James Monroe a little bit,
I do
because
too.
they are very physical, and they can. I mean, you let Brady Baker kind of knock you around a little bit. Good
Yeah,
luck.
and
You're going to lose that
Ryan
tonight.
Mann too, man. He is
Yeah, Ryan's tough.
I think that he's probably the best epitome of like a maverick because he just kind of like he's like a charging horse sometimes. He's so strong and aggressive and plays guard. So yeah,
Yeah, it's funny, fun to watch him because times you feel like, man, he just looks really slow, but he just always knows how to work his way to the basket to kind of get people in bad positions and draw fouls. And I mean, he's an excellent basketball player, very smart, very heady.
Yeah, it's fascinating because I genuinely do think that the two Wyoming County teams and James and Rowe are probably three of the best eight teams in Double A, and we run
Me
into this
too.
every year.
Yep,
But yeah, man, that Double A state tournament is going to be that's going to be the marquee ticket I think this
no
year.
doubt. I
Uh,
totally agree. I mean, that the 1-8 games even should be a pretty good game.
Yeah, which and when we haven't had that, I think last year Bluefield beat like Braxton County or somebody like that by 40 or 50 points, and
Yep.
yeah, I think it's going to be competitive, and that's going to be the ticket that everyone's going to want to get to, and I think that they actually get the 12 o'clock. No, they're the
They're
9
the day
o'clock this
one.
year. Yeah,
Yeah, they're day one.
yeah, so that's going to be a good draw to get people there early. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, kind of moving off of that a little bit. I kind of want to move into to Beckley and kind of hit on it. They got their Hall of Fame game night. They seem to have turned things around a little bit. They picked up a big win against Martinsburg last week. Zion Hawthorne had a really good game with 28 points, and I don't really necessarily know what to make of Martinsburg. They've, I guess, won the games that you'd expect them to, and lost the games that you'd expect them to. Lost to Spring Mills. It's kind of what I expect. I don't know much about Hedgesville or Washington, but I do know that Beckley went up there and lost to them. I think that was right after they lost to South Charleston too.
Yeah. And Hawthorne didn't play.
Yeah, and because he's missed a couple games. Yeah, so
The 3 games that Beckley lost, I really watched. I mean, you were there for the South Charleston game. I really thought he was hurt most of that game. I mean, he really looked in pain. And so I don't think he was himself in the South Charleston game. He didn't play the other 2 games. And then once he was back, then Beckley was back rolling like they had been. So, as long as that's the one thing I've been worried about with Beckley is that I don't think they're real deep. Now, they've had some good kids come in and do some good things. But, when we're talking state tournament runs and things like that, they're a little thin as far as the bench goes.
it's like the James Monroe thing. Like they may not have a star, but they can bring production in from somewhere that,
Right.
hey, we can get this from them. Where Beckley
Right.
and this also has to do with Zion being a great player, but
Right.
you
Right.
can't replace 28 points or what he does as a point guard to dish things, and also how it operates everything else in your offense. Whenever he's out there and you have him playing point guard, you're able to move Kobe off the ball. You can do
Right.
a lot more things with your guys in the screen game. It just helps a lot more.
Yeah.
So yeah, and keeping him healthy, I think is going to be the key. And man, it's it's tough because they're kind of locked into the 3 seed, which means you're going to South Charleston. And that's a tough one. I think we may have talked about this. I'm not sure if we did last time, but when I covered that game, I wrote about it. That's extremely difficult. You have to go to South Charleston. It's not impossible or anything like that. Clearly it seems like they're a different team, but yeah, that's where it kind of stands out for me. But I do want to focus. They have a Hall of Fame night. I think it's on Friday,
Yep.
and they'll be inducting Danny Bickey and Bryce Radford. It's funny because they're starting to get into the players that I covered. For
Right.
years
Right.
it was they're
Right.
inducting like Cam Shannons and guys like that.
Yep.
Great players, but those were guys that were in school when I was also in school.
Right.
But now Bryce and Danny and man, like that was a great shooting backcourt.
No
I
doubt.
was
Yeah.
there. I think that so I always go back to it was December of 2018. I think you were off that day, or like you were doing something that day, and it was a
I had
little
to go to, I remember because I was listening to it on the radio. I had to go to Pittsburgh that
yeah.
day.
And
And,
we got
that's
two
when
great
Bryce
games
just
that
goes
day. I remember both of them.
nutsy. Yeah.
So Greater Beckley and Wyoming East went into overtime in the first game. That was when they had Jay and Potter and all those kids, and Wyoming East had McQuaid, Canada, and Lookabill. I was like, oh yeah, this is a good one. It was a little generals tournament. It's gonna be hard to top that one. Then Bryce Radford puts up 43 in the first half of the second game and sets the program record with 50. And,
Yeah.
man, they had a good run. Unfortunately, that team they lost in the regional. But that man, that was a lot of fun with Danny and Bryce. You know,
Yeah.
a great 3-point shooting backcourt. So it's kind of good to see those guys get in. They had a fun impact on Beckley basketball, and then you talk about what Bryce does in the community now. You obviously can't overlook that, and helping train this next generation. So kind of happy to see those guys get in.
Yeah, and it's fitting they go together. I mean, they both are kind of Batman and Robin kind of, characters out there, a pretty deadly duo. And but boy, I tell you what, they could fill it up now. There's no doubt about it. And they weren't you had to be up on the line to shoot either. They could shoot it from just over half court. So yeah, it's going to be a good night for both of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, Kind of want to go a little bit over to the girls' side, just to kind of update a little bit all around. Double A, that was their bread and butter for a little while, and I when I say that Wyoming East and James Monroe are ranked sixth and seventh respectively, uh, Double A on the girls' side is a mirror of Double A on the boys' side, where
Yep,
that tournament is going to be a lot of fun.
exactly.
You know,
Yeah, it's going to be brutal.
yeah, because
Brutal.
I'm looking at it. Williamstown, St. Mary's, Wheeling Central, whichever two make it out of there. Charleston Catholic, Logan. Uh, who else am I missing? James Monroe, Wyoming East. I think there's another one in there I was thinking about, but yeah, all those teams. If they all get there, which only three from the St. Mary's, Williamstown, only two from St. Mary's, Williamstown, and Wheeling Central will get in. But yeah, that's going to be a massively fun state tournament, depending on who all gets there. Uh, but yeah, it's weird because I was going back and thinking. I think this is probably the lowest that Wyoming East has been ranked in an AP poll since 2020 or so. It had
Right.
to have been the year after Lupartis and Saunders and all those
Yeah.
kids graduated, and James Rose contended and kind of battered around a little bit. Uh, just from talking to coaches within the region, a couple of them, I, I kind of get the feeling that James Monroe is going to walk out of that with the number one seed. So Wyoming East is probably going to end up being the number two, and then I
Right.
would think Mingo Central number three, and then Summers County number four. Anything could happen, but that's kind of the read that I'm getting talking to a couple different coaches. Uh,
Right.
but yeah, it's interesting. It's different kind of looking at these rankings, and we've seen it go a ton of different ways, and to kind of see our Double A Region Three teams be ranked below the top five, it's almost a little bit unheard of.
Yeah, Double A's really kind of. I think what's kind of hurt Wyoming East a little bit too is the ones in front of them have really started to pick up some big wins. I mean that even though
Logan beat
Charleston
him head to
Catholic
head,
doesn't,
yeah.
yeah, doesn't beat Greenbrier East, they almost beat Greenbrier East. That's a people saying possibly a AAA state champion possible. They looked really good that night, and of course, the three, Wheeling Central and that bunch, they've been really good all year. And Logan's kind of jumped back in the picture just a little bit, and made himself look pretty good. So, I honestly, I would like to stay out of that 4-5 game, even if it meant you were down at 6 and 7.
Hmm.
That 4-5 game is always seems to be a brutal one, even though you're going to get a little time off after that one. But it's always a hard game to win. It's just never. Not that the others are easy, but it just seems to be a dogfight, the whole way. So, I don't think I'd be too unhappy to be out of that game, but with one of the three falling out, in the Wheeling Central region, one of those two teams could wind up in the 4-5 game.
Yeah, and it's different from years past because I felt like Wyoming East and whoever they played in the state championship were kind of ahead of the field, and
Yeah,
when they beat Summers County, they were 15 points better there than Williamstown and Wheeling Central. I think those three were much better than the rest of the field. When they played Parkersburg Catholic, those two teams were better than the field. This year, I don't think that there's, if I were to seed them right now, you could tell me that a one seed wins or a six seed wins, and I wouldn't be surprised. Uh,
exactly.
so by seeding, I think the only seed that matters is probably the one seed. You want to get the one seed, and I think Wheeling Central probably has that one locked up anyways,
Yeah,
provided they get there. But that's kind of how I look at it. The only buy in a sense is if you get that one seed and you get an easy first round win potentially. But after
right.
that, it gets extremely difficult. The
Yeah,
four seed's not going to be easy to beat. The two, three, it's genuinely going to be a tough trek. There's nowhere to hide. So that's
yeah.
why these double A tournaments on both sides, I think have the chance to be remarkable.
I think especially on the girls' side, it's going to boil down to defense. Whoever plays the best defense, because it can get really tough to score down there. Even in Wyoming East run last year, they had a tough time in the first game, a tough time in the state championship game. And the games are probably going to be in the upper 30s to low 40s. It's going to be a grinder. Shots are going to be important, but defense is going to be magnified because you got to be able to stop some people. And whoever plays the best defense, I think, is going to win that. And that could be anybody. It's who can turn their game up to that point, in those three crucial games. So, it's like you say. I mean, I 1 through 6, any of the 1 through 6, I think, and you never know. The 7 or 8 could sneak in there and shock some people by winning a game or two. So who knows?
Yeah, absolutely. My kind of early prediction for that tournament is you hit on it. I think if you're getting state championship games and semifinal games in the 40s, which is uncommon, you go back to last year and years before that, I think that you're looking at Wyoming East and Logan and Williamstown or St. Mary's. That's probably the game that they want to play, especially a Williamstown or a Wyoming East at this point with the defense. If
Right.
you're getting the game into the high 50s and 60s, you're playing Wheeling Central's game because they do a really good job of they got shooters. They do a lot of cherry picking. They always have somebody leaking out. So if they get a
Yep.
rebound, there's throw it to an open streaker. They get a lot of points that way. So I think that I wouldn't be if you tell me who the state champion will be, I can probably give you like how many points they're going to score. But yeah, it's going to come down to the style of game there.
Yeah.
Moving on over to AAA, Greenbrier East, they suffered their first loss to Nitro. It was at Nitro, so they've now split. And it's kind of reflected in the polls a little bit. Greenbrier East has dropped to number two. The Nitros picked up some impressive wins. I think they beat Wheeling Park, and
It did. Yeah. That was a big one.
and
Yeah.
I know Park is has been battered this year. I think Bordas is their only returning starter. Uh,
Right.
but yeah, I mean, it's been impressive. They've opened some eyes, and that kind of shows you what people think of with the seeding. That's another one that's dangerous. I Grafton, I think, is tied for number two in the AP poll. And then Wayne at number four, you really can't discount them.
Yeah, that's the team I've kind of been watching. I was like, man, they're actually playing some really good basketball. And the only bugaboo about Wayne, and it just seems like it's been the girls' basketball, the volleyball. I mean, they seem like they get that first round game and they can't get over the hump of that first round game. They wind up, getting upset or not playing well. And if they can get past that, then it's hard to tell where we're going to go from there. But I really kind of like them a little bit. I mean, not that I dislike Nitro. I think Nitro's doing some good things, but I mean, the Greenbrier East thing, I didn't really wasn't surprised by that. I felt like Greenbrier East was going into a bit of a buzzsaw there, and it was a huge atmosphere. It's on the road. Not a big shocker that game kind of went that way. A little surprising that that Wheeling Park won. That game went like it did, but
So I'm going to cut you off there. Well, what are your impressions of Greenbrier? Because you had a chance to watch their game against West, right?
yeah, I think the problem with the thing that worries me about Greenbrier East right now is the fact that McKenna McClure has been out. And, she's not a name that's going to jump out of the stat book on you every night, but she's going to fill up the stat sheet every night. And, her 8, 10 points and 7 rebounds and 5 assists, things like that every single night they were the difference maker. And I think since she's been out, that Greenbrier East has struggled just a little bit. Trying to put it all together. Now, granted, the girls that have replaced her have played well, but the problem is like it slows down your rotation, and they're not quite as deep as they were, and a lot of times when teams would try to shut the other scorers down, which that's a lot of what Charleston Catholic did. They really tried to take the other three scorers out. Then McKenna was right there to kind of step in and fill the gap. And without her in, and I think they're still really good, but it definitely takes them down a notch from what they were. When I watched them earlier in the year, I honestly felt like they were the best team in the state in AAA. Now I'm kind of hedging just a little bit, because that really is a big loss for them, and that gives Nitro just a little bit of an edge, in that battle. But they still got to get through some of these other teams that are really good too.
And one thing we talked about earlier in the year is the consistency in their schedule. And I know the West game was earlier in the week, but I do think it's kind of hard to be playing that, only Friday, only Saturday schedule, and a lot of teams don't really want to accommodate that. And there are a lot of different things that come with it. So it's difficult, and especially when you get these snow days. Like say you get a Friday snow or a Saturday snow, then you're
Right.
kind of cut and you're in a tough predicament there.
I think one thing too is that it's almost I kind of reference it to baseball when when you're hitting the ball hard, but you're hitting it right at somebody, and you're like frustrated because you're right on the mark, but it's just not finding a gap. And I think Kennedy's a little bit like that. Kennedy Stewart right now is like she is just right there, but balls are kind of rattling out on her, and it's almost like you think, okay, this is going to turn, eventually, and she's going to kind of be, catch fire. And you kind of wonder if that's not going to happen at just the right time for Greenbrier East. So I don't know. I just and I don't think they're quite as good as they have been, just because of McKenna not being able to play. But they're still deadly. They still can definitely win this thing.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to watch. I think that they're probably fine within the region. Uh, I don't think they really have a ton that will really bother them. I'd probably say, if a team like Pikeview was able to get physical with them, but I
Yeah,
think the issue with like a Pikeview is probably you have to kind of find enough points in order to sustain that. And
yeah.
I'm not sure that they can really do that. Now they play a very physical game, which is
Yeah.
which is
Which I think
tough.
Pikeview and Princeton
Yeah.
both are kind of that way. They can be physical, defensively. It's just can they get enough points to take to carry them, what their defensive efforts going to put out there.
Uh, I think that's probably all. I can't think of anything else on the girls' side that would really stand out. I do kind of want to bounce back over to the boys' side really quick and kind of hit on that AAA region. I do think Shady's probably secured the number one seed there.
I think that's a lock. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you get a chance to actually watch the Greenbrier East game?
With Shady,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah. I
Okay.
mean, it was close till the what, fourth quarter.
Yeah,
It
that's the
kind of
one that I
broke
was
open a
kind
little
of
bit.
out of the loop on. So I kind of wanted to get your read on that because that was the one I think we were all looking at. And other coaches were, yeah, okay, like, Greenbrier East is pretty good. Like, what does Shady have for him? And, the final score, it really wasn't close.
Well, I think what if when you watch the game, I felt like Shady had the game in control the whole way, but Greenbrier East was right there, with a shot. Just kind of got away with them from him at the end. But with Shady's dominance at home, that really didn't surprise me. I mean, I really kind of felt that way that the game would kind of go like that. I think where Greenbrier East is going to get hurt is the fact that this next game with Shady, I don't know if it'll get played before the votes are due. And see, that's Greenbrier East's kind of ace in the hole is if they can beat Shady at Greenbrier East, that's the best win amongst the other teams in that region. Even I think right now, if my gut feeling is Herbert Hoover is going to be the two, and with Hoover kind of taking it on the chin to Nitro the other night, if Greenbrier East could turn around and wind up winning, then they might be able to sneak in there and get the two. I really think Greenbrier East is the second best team in that region, but the fact that they can't, they're probably going to have to go to Hoover. That's going to be tough if it comes down to that.
Yeah, sorry, I've got dogs running around here in the background. So the typical, usually it's an issue with them barking, but right now it's just them kind of running around all over the place. But yeah, I think the thing that really works in Shady's favor is probably the fact that, you don't probably, I would imagine the way things are going to shake out, they'll probably be Shady one, and then either Hoover or Greenbrier East two and three.
Right.
You don't have to worry about seeing them again.
Right. Exactly. because then after that you're looking at Princeton, which Princeton's a dangerous team. They're athletic. They can cause you problems if you have a bad shooting night or something like that. And you never know what the scheme's going to be, if they're going to change the way they play or something like that. Beasley can go off for 20, 25, and you just never know. But after Princeton, just off the top of my head, I can't think of anybody else that. Well, Independence, I mean, Independence has been playing pretty well at times, so they can be a little sneaky.
Yeah. Uh, I guess it just depends on how much you can challenge them in the post. It's really interesting. I'm kind of curious to see how AAA unfolds, especially if we get the teams we think we do get there. Like we've talked about, I like the coaches poll because I often think it's indicative of how the
That's
coaches are
from
going to vote when
right,
it comes
right.
to these sort of deals. And I don't think the coaches have a ton of respect for what Shady is this year of what they've put together. And
Yeah,
I say that, they're a top three team. But when we look at it, it's like, I know each year is different, but I do think there has to be a level of reverence for the fact that, they've been to the last four state championship games and they've won two of them and they're right here again. So, that may all be wrong. It may turn out that, Bridgeport or Nitro or whoever else just blasts them by 25 and,
right.
shows like, hey, like we've been the real number one all year long. Uh,
Yeah.
but we've seen Shady. We think that they're pretty good. Uh,
And Shady's schedule is respectable. I mean, it's
yeah,
tough. I mean, you got to win over Woodrow, and that's basically should be a top five quad A team. They've got that win over them. They've handled Princeton, they've handled Greenbrier East, they've handled Fairmont Senior. I mean, I don't know a lot of what else they need to do in order to get that, but and unfortunately, I think over the years as I've watched these things, it's almost like people get tired
yeah.
when teams keep winning.
It's like the
And
it's like the Chiefs thing and the Patriots.
right, yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, it's almost like
especially in
you
the
find
90s.
reasons. It's like, well, I think Bridgeport's better because of this, and you kind of discount, a lot of what maybe Shady's done or something like that. But I mean, I'm like you. I mean, what they've put together is impressive, and they've put together enough to be the number one seed. But I think a lot of times in the back of people's mind, they're kind of tired of it a little bit. And then, you throw Bridgeport up there. And I haven't looked at Bridgeport's schedule. I know they're a good team. I'm not saying they're not. I think, Bridgeport has a way of being a really good team, but I don't, I haven't seen where, a win jumped out that would just make me step back and like, oh, okay, Bridgeport's the team, which, Shady has kind of put those wins together and put the wins together in some tough places. I mean, even though the Pikeview game was tough, people don't understand how hard it is to win at Pikeview. I mean, that's Pikeview's a lot of times night and day, and when they're at Gardner, they're vicious. They're hard to beat.
Hmm. And they were hitting a lot that night.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm looking at Bridgeport's schedule. I guess the wins that would stand out to me are probably University boys. Uh,
Is that early or has that been recent?
that was on February 8th, so about
Yeah,
11 days
that's a
ago.
good win. Yeah, the
Yeah.
university's pretty solid.
Then they lost to Nitro by 8 points. They beat Fairmont Senior by 18 in the second game of the season, but we saw that Fairmont Senior team on Saturday against Shady, and I know it was a 1 point game at halftime, but I didn't really look at that game, and I know Fairmont Senior has three starters back. I'd never really looked at that game and felt that Shady was in any trouble.
I didn't either.
It just
Yeah,
never seemed that way.
yeah.
They led
And I
13
felt
points.
really in the first half if Shady makes the majority of the looks at the rim that they had that they missed, which they typically don't.
Yeah.
It's a double digit game at halftime, and it's a blowout.
Yeah, I had them 1 of 8 from the field in the second quarter. It's not like they took a ton of bad shots. Like they only took seven
Yeah,
or eight threes.
exactly.
They just kind of drove downhill on them. And even Dave Retton, the head coach at Fairmont Senior, talked about the dribble penetration.
Yeah.
Not to dismiss Fairmont because obviously they're a great program, and I wouldn't be shocked if somehow they found themselves deep like playing on that Thursday or Friday.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, but I kind of look at it and I don't think that there's really a ton here that I would think, hey, I would necessarily have them over Shady or
Yeah.
whatever. But
And both of the losses to Woodrow, which again, we're talking about a top five quad A team,
we
are
flip games.
basically last possession games. I mean,
Yeah,
it's, so I mean, I just don't, I think Shady's earned the number one spot, but again, I've seen these things happen before.
yeah, and I would imagine for them it probably doesn't matter either one way or the other. The way they probably look at it is, bulletin board material or something like
Right,
that,
right.
or
Yeah,
hey, like let's we got to win either way because that's the thing is
yeah.
you don't usually don't win championships by playing bad teams. Like
Well,
yeah,
the only kicker would be that you're likely going to be playing
the 2-3
Nitro
seed.
and Bridgeport,
Yeah,
where, like you say, not that Fairmont's a bad team, but if you lined up those three teams, Fairmont's probably the team you're going to want to say, okay, we'll take our crack at them as opposed to the other two. So, Nitro is definitely a good team. I mean, they're probably going to wind up being the 3 seed and could very well be the 1 seed. I mean, they've got a case that that they've got some good wins too. So, it's the top three is going to be pretty tough in AAA, and then the ones you can't forget about are teams right on down behind them. So I don't know. It's going to be a good tournament.
yeah, absolutely. Do you have any final thoughts on any of the basketball stuff? Obviously, we got about a week or so before we get into this new regional format, which is a little bit different, a little bit unique, and we'll hit on some football news here in a second. But any
Yeah,
thoughts?
it's kind of scattered out. I mean, it's really weird when you look at it. Sometimes you're playing and then within 5 days, and then sometimes it's another week, and that's the thing kind of concerns me a little bit about this weather and the unfortunate flooding and stuff. Is some of these teams aren't really haven't played. I mean, I was looking at Greater Beckley. They played West Side. I think it was Monday night, I believe,
Hmm.
and that was only like their second game in a couple weeks. So, those things you kind of worry about, how that's going to carry over as far as consistency and things like that go. But, you got to play the hand you're dealt and, make do with what you got.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess in the football news, Princeton, most of their entire staff has either resigned. Some of them got opportunities. The coach at the next level. Some of them just kind of wanted to step away, and I kind of understand because there's a lot of that's intense. It's
Yeah,
very in not to slander Princeton or anything like that, but that is a very intense community, and that's not even just me saying that. That is numerous coaches that have said that over the years.
exactly.
It's very intense, and I don't think that necessarily fully played into the coach's decisions. I know some of them, it's personal decision. Kind of football takes a lot of commitment, especially with what Princeton has done over the last couple of years with these deep runs. But
Yep.
man, talent wise, that's kind of a gold mine job. At least for a 1 year thing, you bring back a ton of talented seniors. Uh, probably the team in contention with the most returning, which makes it incredibly interesting. Keith Taylor, I think, did a great job there. Was a really good personality coach for that group, and kind of got the best out of them and got the best out of Princeton football that it's ever had. They've never had a 2 year stretch or even a 1 year stretch or anything like what they had while he was at the helm. So I think that they're going to miss him in a lot of ways, and miss a lot of the guys on that staff because. Man, it was a crazy experience. They went through a lot this year, and either way you split it, it takes it takes a lot from a staff, no matter what you think, to be able to manage those ups and downs and those expectations. So the next coaching staff that comes in is they're gonna have some big shoes to fill, in a lot of different ways. But it's if you want to try your luck at it, this is a problem. Jobs like this don't come open very often.
True, but and it's a lot of reason he's got the kids that he has there is style. I mean, and that goes back a few years. They like the wide open style. They can throw it all over the field. They still run it, but that's a lot of the draw there is that kids like to play in that kind of an offense, and so the next guy you got bring in, that's a concern. What kind of offensive scheme are they going to bring in, and what do they want to run, and things like that. Because a lot of different philosophies in football about how you get things done, and I think that's a big factor as to who they will choose. But yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, the thing about life is, and I guess we see that more and more, but you just never know. You just never know what the next day is going to bring, the next week, the next month, and when things transpire, it. Not that you want to step away, but sometimes that's the best way to handle things. And it's going to be interesting to see who they choose. I mean, it wasn't that long ago when I remember Princeton wasn't very good. They struggled for quite a while, and they've really kind of rebirthed this thing and made them a powerhouse and a top contender each year. And so the next guy, not only we talk about following legends or things like that, but the next guy steps in, the expectation level is going to be well, we got what semifinal and a final the last 2 years, so that's big shoes to fill.
Yeah, and when I broke the news, the one thing I do regret is I didn't add the clarification because when these things happen, people often think that it's something nefarious, and there was nothing like that.
Right, exactly.
These were all just
Yep.
personal reasons. Chris Belcher, the OC, he had resigned earlier in the year, but he got a job to coach tight ends at Concord. And from what I understand, he's kind of been looking for an opportunity to go to the next level. And you look at their offense over the last couple of years, he obviously deserves that opportunity. And Coach Keith Taylor had some personal things that he wants to work with, and some of the other coaches, football just it takes a lot out of you,
It
especially
sure
when
does.
it's
But we
demanding.
see that across the states. I mean that the you don't see coaches last for years and years and years very often, and it's tough. It's really tough.
I will say I have heard some potential names. One of them I think would kind of be a home run hire, especially on the football side. And it wouldn't necessarily, it would probably shock some people in some ways, but it it would kind of be a shock, but kind of wouldn't be a shock. Be a home run hire, but I'm not sure with a lot of things kind of going on around Princeton athletics right now. I don't know that they're totally, and I understand this line of thought. There have been some bad things that have happened, and
Right.
this isn't
Right.
in the football program, just uh, in different programs. And I think that when you're in that administration standpoint, you're kind of looking to get leaders of youth and just try not to get somebody in there that's, you that has character issues, per se.
Right. Right.
Trying to make sure the word is the right way, so that way, legally it clears everything. But
Right.
there has been a lot of turmoil over there. And I think that administration up from the school standpoint up to the board, they have a lot of things that they want to check off, and I'm not necessarily sure that football will be at the top of the priority list. They probably want to check off a couple other boxes before they're like, okay, like let's get to the X's and O's of things before we do all that. So yeah, and then again, I understand the approach. I completely do, especially with a lot of things that have been coming out in the news in recent day
Be
or
really careful.
yeah, you have to be really careful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any final thoughts before we wrap this thing up?
No, just hopefully the weather will break, and I mean it's going to be better next week. But we need this thing to break. I mean we're not far off from softball and baseball. We need Mother Nature to get straightened out here.
Yeah, it's been a really weird year, so we're definitely going to see kind of I've talked about it. I at the beginning of the week, I live on a hill, so it's tough. It's like, oh, well, there's snow and you can't get off of it. I'm like, oh, well, it flooded, so kind of glad to be on a hill, so that way you're able to
Right.
preserve, your property and things like that, and I'll have to worry about that aspect of it. And then
Yeah.
it's snow and ice again today, so
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
I just
obviously thoughts with all those people affected by the flood. We have a lot of people in our
yeah,
coverage
that's
area that
that's
got hit
that's a
hard.
bad deal right there. That's bad.
Yeah,
So,
it's tough.
unfortunate.
Yeah. But thoughts with them. But yeah, I want to thank Ross Udy for joining me today, and hopefully looking forward to getting you back on the podcast pretty soon. But for Rusty, I'm Tyler Jackson, the publisher and editor at Play Sheet Sports. We'll see you next time.